One of my favorite movie series is The Lord of the Rings, and my favorite character from that is Aragorn. I learn from everything that I see, movies being one of them. Growing up, I watched Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, a lot of movies, and from every experience in my life, I've learned things. And I want to give this speech today about what a great king Aragorn is. Now, there's Veterans Day music playing in the background, and I thought it would be more appropriate to go somewhere quiet, but upon further reflection, I realized that Aragorn is a commander of armies, and this is actually an appropriate venue, which seemed to materialize without me needing to do anything to achieve that. So let's get into some background. In The Lord of the Rings, there is this ring that it was forged many thousands of years ago, which is a tool of power for the most evil person in the world, and it gets lost, and for years we have a period of peace. At the beginning of The Lord of the ring is found, and they realize that it is indeed that ring of power which can give total earthly power to whomever holds it. There is a character named Frodo, who is the most young and innocent character, who eventually takes the burden of taking this ring to its destruction in the fires of Mount Doom, which is in the land of the bad guy who spawned it. He needs to brave all sorts of hazards between hot and cold, enemy, crows, whatever it may be, and he is tested to the very metal, to the very core of his being, with the temptation of using this ring which may then eventually corrupt his soul. Now, Frodo is one line of the storyline in Lord of the Rings. He's the main character. I'm speaking about Aragorn. Aragorn is the heir, thousands of years after the king of the men, whose name is Isildur, who had a fatal flaw. He got the Ring of Power, and instead of destroying it in the Mount Doom, he took it upon himself to hold it, because to hold something that has that much power in a world where there's so much villainy, so much fear, that is a very tempting power. He went to the fires of Mount Doom, almost threw it in, and then, with an evil grin, put the ring on and went about the rest of his life, which was not very long because he got shot by arrows when he was swimming and he died. The ring was then lost for thousands of years. Aragorn, who is the king, who is the king of men by birthright, has been put in the shadows. He is a sweaty, dirty, grimy ranger, and he protects a bunch of people in a city named Bree. And he sits in their bars and watches them drink and laugh and enjoy themselves. And he is spat upon by these people. He is considered to be this skillless, weird, strange guy who just sits in the shadows, and he's called Strider. Now, he takes it upon himself to guard Frodo because he knows how important it is to make sure that this ring eventually gets destroyed. At the Council of Elrond, where the heads of the civilized people meet to figure out what to do with the ring, he talks about how simple people who are not in charge of their own defense remain simple, and they hate the people who defend them. And he is consistently taken it upon himself to take that role, irrespective of how people treat him. Now, there's a group of people who go off to go destroy the ring. They decided at this council. Among this is another man named Boromir. Boromir's family holds the city between Mordor, the bad area, and the rest of the world. And Boromir is a militant guy, and he's full of fear because his whole life he has seen his brothers and kinmen be slain in battles with the bad guys. Boromir is of a different mind. He wants to take the ring for himself and for his people because he believes, of course, that's the right thing. Why would you walk the ring into the bad guy's lair? That sounds absolutely ridiculous. And he has that intention to begin with, that we should take it, we should use it. And he continually gets silenced. And he says, okay, all right, I'll shut my mouth. And he goes along with these people into this perilous journey. But that seed within him that wanted to take the ring did not go away. When they enter the sacred elven land, Boromir says, I feel a sense of evil in this land. And this land is a pure place that reflects only what's within you. And Aragorn tells him, there is no evil here besides what you have brought with you yourself. Upon leaving this land, they get chased by these Uruk-hai. Uruk-hai are these soldiers created in hell. They're more ghastly, more strong, more militant, more awful than the most foul orcs. And Boromir tries to take the ring from Frodo. He lures him into the woods and then he descends into an insanity, and this creature takes over this alternate personality takes over his being, and he by force tries to take the ring, and Frodo runs away in terror. And Boromir says, "You seek to give the ring to Sauron. I know your mind. It should not be yours except by unhappy chance. It could have been mine. It should have been mine." Frodo runs away, and he is then found by Aragorn. And Frodo is now terrified of men, and he sees Aragorn and clutches the ring and says, "Do you wish to take the ring from me?" Then he says, "Would you take the ring from me?" Aragorn says, "Frodo, I swore my life to protect you." Frodo hands him the ring. Aragorn walks up to Frodo, puts his hand on his, closes it, presses it to Frodo's chest, and says, "I would have gone with you to the end, to the very fires of Mordor." And Frodo says, "I know." Aragorn, for many years, has been developing this trust within himself, a deep love for his people, regardless of whether they hated him, what they thought of him, and he would always do the right thing. Though he was tempted by the weakness in his bloodline, the very mistake Isildur made 2,000 years ago by taking the ring for himself, Aragorn is tempted with this same fate at this moment and rejects it. This may be one of the very inspirations that helps Frodo along as he continues in his journey. Meanwhile, Boromir gets shot by orcs. He gets shot in the chest, then in the abdomen, and then the stomach. And this one Uruk-hai, the main guy, gets all up in his face and is about to shoot him right in the head. And Aragorn tackles him and gets into this intense battle with the head of the Uruk-hai. Aragorn almost dies, but he eventually kills him. And as Boromir is taking his dying breaths, he says, "I tried to take the ring from Frodo. I failed." And Aragorn says, "With all the life that's in me, I will not let our people fall." And Boromir and Aragorn sort of contend for the position of the throne. And Boromir says, "Our people?" He says to Aragorn, "I would have gone with you, my brother, my captain, my king." And he dies. Aragorn kisses his forehead and lays him to rest. Aragorn, through his continued noble service for everybody, Frodo, Boromir, whoever it may be, whether they hate him or not, whether they have turned out to be evil at moments of their life, they can tell that Aragorn loves and cares for them. Going further, into 2 movies later, they're at the end of the 3rd movie, and Frodo is in Mordor, and Aragorn sends an entire army into Mordor just to distract the bad guy, so the bad guy doesn't detect Frodo. And Aragorn doesn't even know if Frodo's actually there, or if Frodo's alive. But he stakes everything on chance, knowing that only with this extreme gamble would it work that Frodo would successfully be able to take the ring into Mordor. And he says, when someone says that this is a lost cause, we're all gonna die, he says, "Then I will die with them." He leads his men into battle, and he says, and they're accosted by armies of orcs, Uruk-hai, goblins, you name it, horrifying things. And Aragorn says to his people, he rides in front, back and forth in front of his line of men, and says, "The day may come when the strength of men falls, when we all lose our bravery and fall into cowardice. But it is not this day. I see in your hearts the same fear that would take the heart out of me. But for as long as Frodo is alive, and as long as this mission continues, it is not this day that we will fall. Today, we fight." And they all rile up, going from fear to energy to go and fulfill this mission. And then he turns around to his men and he whispers, "For Frodo." Then they chant, "For Frodo!" And they march into battle, and many of them die. Aragorn doesn't, but he fights at the very front of them. And eventually, Frodo is able to take the ring all the way up to Mount Doom, with the help of his very loyal and loving and trusting friend Sam. And as he is about to throw the ring in the fire, we see a repeat of what happened 2,000 years ago when another man, although Frodo is a hobbit, was in the same position. What would you do if you were in a world filled with violence, fear, agony? Maybe the end of the world will be coming soon if the bad guys have the power. What would you do with this tool of ultimate power, especially when you've gone through turmoil after turmoil after turmoil? Would you throw the ring in the fire? Isildur didn't, and Frodo didn't. He took the ring for himself, and he says, "The ring is mine," with the same evil smile that Isildur had 2,000 years ago. And Sam, his friend, is in horror. They went through all of this just for Frodo to fail at the end. It is a pernicious, persistent human weakness, and Aragorn himself knew that he was not strong enough to take the ring into the fires and throw it in. And it turns out that Gollum, who is this sort of weird character through the whole movies, ends up coming in, he fights with Frodo for the ring, and Gollum, who's obsessed over the ring for his whole life, finally gets the ring, and he dances in ecstatic joy when he finally gets it. Yes! Yes! Precious! Precious! And then he gets pushed into the fire, and as he falls in, his body is getting melted from his toes to his chest, and he is clutching this precious ring as his head gets melted, and the last thing that goes under is the ring. It finally is destroyed, and all the bad guys that Aragorn is fighting, they all died. They collapsed under some landslide or something. To close off the series, Aragorn finally gets his position as the King of Gondor, and he is crowned, and he has a beautiful elven wife who chose elves are immortal. She chose to be mortal, to live a life with this man who was so respectful, respectable, noble, and dignified, and they took their position as king and queen. And Frodo, Sam, and their two other hobbit friends came and they bowed to Aragorn at his coronation. Aragorn says, "You bow to no one." And he bows, and every single person in the audience bows, and is one of the most beautiful moments in the entire film. So whatever lessons we need to learn about leadership, kingliness, being devoted to our people, whether we're in a position of leadership like Aragorn, maybe gonna be in a position of leadership like Aragorn, or being a regular citizen, people are always worth defending. We can always remember and think of the best qualities within the people around us, and we can always love each other as Aragorn loved everybody else, and as they all began to love him.